Hey guys, it's Lock on Castle coming to you with a new video today. And today I'm going to be reviewing the new movie, Dracula Untold from Universal Pictures. And I'm going to go through, give you the plot, give you my opinions on some events within the movie. And then at the end, I'm going to compare it to Castlevania, which I believe it draws many parallels from. So without further ado, let's get started. So the film opens up as a slideshow showing Vlad the Impaler, whom is the main character's past. And this is narrated by his son from the movie, whom pretty much tells how Vlad became the Impaler, hence his nickname, and how he was took as a child by the Turkish people, trained as a soldier, and became the killing machine that he is today. So, flashback to the story's main timeline, and we see that Vlad is on a scouting mission within his kingdom and finds a Turkish helmet which is from a scout that he believes came from a mountain. So he goes with his men up into the mountain, goes into a cave where they believe the Turkish men are hiding, and they encounter a being whom is a vampire, whom kills both of his soldiers, and Vlad barely makes it out alive, and only makes it out because he had a pure silver sword, which, according to legend, is very effective at killing vampires. So he goes back down to his village, tells the priest of what has happened, and they tell him that these beings are monsters, demons, whatever you want to call them. And so at this point, we see a little more about his family, his wife, his son, uh, just world building in general. And it's Easter the next day, so they're having a banquet, celebrating, and at this point, the Turkish men walk in and they look for their tribute, which is a bunch of silver coins. So he pays them their tribute. However, they're here for something a lot more sinister this time. They want 1,000 of the village's children to use as soldiers in the army. And being reasonable, Vlad refuses and said that he's going to go talk to their general. So he goes and talks to their general, whom is one of his childhood friends. And it's at this point that the general says, "I'll take 1,001 children. The extra one is your son." And Vlad reasonably goes insane and becomes very, very angry at that. So when the Persians follow him back, Turkish people follow him back to go take his son, he kills all of them and thus starts a war. And at this point, since it would be like 100 of his men versus 100,000 of the Turks, he had no other choice but to go back to the heart of evil, which happens to be the vampire. So ascending the mountain, we see some very nice camera shots, wide angle, and that kind of stuff. And he goes to the vampire, asks him if he can somehow borrow his power. To this, the vampire bites his own wrist, which is one of the things you do in Castlevania to open up doors and such for sacrificial altars. So, there's a parallel in that regard. And then takes the blood and puts it into a skull. He tells Vlad to drink, and from henceforth his name will be Dracula. He also tells him that he can become normal again if for 3 days, which is how long the power lasts, he does not drink anybody's blood. But if he does, he'll be stuck with eternal damnation of being Dracula, having vampiric powers, and the vampire Caligula will be able to roam free and take his vengeance upon his master. So after getting his power, he comes back and his village is being sieged by the Turks. So we get to see some badass effects here, and he utterly mops the floor with 1,000 of them, just completely destroying them using his bat form, which is also in Castlevania, so there's that. And at this point, the word comes back to the general that all of his men are dead, so he says, 1,000 doesn't work, let's use 100,000. So he sends all of his troops in to try to go kill him. And no Vlad, aka Dracula at this point, decides the only thing he can do is march up to the monastery where they can't be hit by cannons and try to kill them from there. So doing that, we get some marching scenes. He's heading out. The Turks are following him, and attempts to make love to his wife, but the problem being there, he gets bloodlust in the middle of it, and thus starts a downward spiral. We see that light burns him, so he has to stay inside of his tent for the majority of that time. And during that time, the Turks had a chance to go ahead of the villagers and set up a trap. This trap ends up killing one of his best friends and almost killing his family if he hadn't got there in time, which he did and killed the rest of them. So after this part, they finally make it to the monastery, and they begin to get ready to prepare for the siege and arm themselves. And at this point, all the villagers find out that he is a monster and try to burn him at the stake. That doesn't go so well, but they end up following him, so he continues to lead them and ascends a tower and comes up with a plan. This plan is to use a massive amount of bats to destroy the army, which effectively works in a very, I'd say, mediocre CGI effect. And at this point, he sees the general, or what's supposed to be the general, goes to try to kill him, and at that point he realizes it was an imposter, and it was a distraction to get him away from the monastery so that the other Turks could get in, and they end up pushing his wife off of a cliff, and she falls to her death. Well, she was gonna die, but it's at this point that she says, the only way to save our son is for you to drink my blood. So he drinks her blood and forever seals himself as Lord Dracula. And thus goes a quest of vengeance. He looks around the monastery, sees a bunch of other people that were left from his village, just injured, about to die. So he has them all drink his blood and become vampires. So he goes to hunt down the Turks, utterly decimates what's left of their army, and goes in a one-on-one fight with the general. And it's at this point that the general had already known about his weakness. So the entire room that they fight in is lined with silver coins, and he has a silver sword. So Dracula is utterly outmatched for the majority of this fight, simply because the silver is weakening him. And when he's about to get a stake thrust through his heart, he turns into a bat at the last second, gets behind the general, and stabs a stake through his heart, thus killing him and saving his son. So as he walks out, he's got his son with him, and all the other vampires that he had created tell him that the only way they can continue on is to kill his son, because now it's human versus vampires. So at this point, he does not want to do it, and he kills one of his other old friends whom had become a vampire when he tries to attack his son. And at the last possible second, the priest from earlier in the film that I said would be important now, came up with a cross, which affects all the vampires except for Dracula, and takes his son with him to go rule the kingdom. And then Dracula, now having control over day and night, removes the clouds and has all the vampires, including himself, burn from the sun's rays. And the only thing to survive is actually him. And we see that a worshipper gives him blood, which revives him, and thus he continues on to live in immortality. Flash forward to nowadays, and we see that he lives in what looks like a modern version of Transylvania, which looks very much like the version from Castlevania Lords of Shadows 2. And we see that what appears to be a reincarnation of his wife is there, and he talks with her a bit and follows her out of the town square. However, something else was following him, and that was Caligula. However, based on his dressing, he looks a lot like Zobek from Castlevania Lord of Shadows 2 and Castlevania Lord of Shadows 1, which means we should believe that his legend is a parallel to Zobek's in regards to the fact that if they do have a sequel, I believe it will have some regards to Lords of Shadows 2, in that his master is the devil, so they're going to try to kill the devil, but at the same time, Dracula wants him dead. So overall, for sound design and music, I would give this film a 9 out of 10. They have a great orchestral score, and because of that, the film was very much a Renaissance era-esque film. For CGI, I would probably give it a 5 or 6 out of 10, just simply because like the bat swarms were terrible, and that was the main CGI draw of the film. For acting, though, I would give it an 8 out of 10 because they chose very good actors for the parts themselves. I mean, they could have gotten better if they had chosen A-list actors. I mean, these are like at the bottom of the A-list to B-list actors, but no offense to the actors, of course. But overall, for what they did with that film, I believe it was a good film, and I believe that since it is having a sequel, which has been confirmed, that we might actually have the first ever video game movie that is not terribly budgeted and by a underlisting studio. I mean, a Universal Pictures Castlevania movie with good production value and, of course, a good budget. This one had roughly, I believe it was $70 million budget. Could turn out to be a turning point in the industry for video game movies. And it's for that reason that I believe this movie can be the start of great things. Now, there is one plot hole that could affect this sequel, and that would be the fact that his son may have died, aka Alucard. And yes, his son's name was different in the film. However, in the Castlevania mythos, he didn't actually know his son's name, he just knew that his son was the opposite of him, so thus he called him Alucard, which is Dracula spelled backwards for those of you who don't actually know that. So we could see his son as an immortal vampire as well in a potential sequel. So those are just my 2 cents on this. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always guys, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any suggestions for films I should see or more content you would like to see in the future, leave a comment down below. And have a nice day, guys.